In a quiet suburban backyard, a primal war was underway. A 15-foot Burmese python had wrapped its crushing coils around a wild bobcat mother, slowly squeezing the life from her spotted body. But this wasn't just a battle between predators. Hidden beneath the azalea bushes, 3 tiny kittens watched the brutal battle, and their mother was losing. But just when all hope seems lost, a garbage collector named Jake, who heard the cries and stumbled upon the gruesome spectacle. What happens next is a miracle of sheer maternal fury. You will not believe the ending to this story. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The Tuesday morning on Maple Street began with an almost painted-on perfection. In this quiet corner of suburban North Carolina, the air was still cool, smelling of damp grass and the sweet tea perfume of blooming magnolias. Lawns were edged, hedges were trimmed, and the only sound that broke the 6 a.m. stillness was the distant rhythmic rumble of the neighborhood's approaching sanitation truck. At the wheel of that truck was Jake Thornton. Jake was a man carved from the same quiet, steady material as the oak trees lining the street. At 58, with a face mapped by sun and kindness, he was a widower who found a peculiar solace in his root. He wasn't just a garbage collector. He was the neighborhood's silent guardian, its most reliable witness. He knew who was getting a new roof, who was planting a garden, and who had left for vacation. He saw the rhythms of life from the cab of his truck, and he liked the predictability of it. This Tuesday, however, that predictability was about to be shattered. He'd just turned onto Maple, the truck's hydraulics hissing as he compacted a load, when a sound sliced through the air. It was a cry. It wasn't the yelp of a dog or the screech of a blue jay. It was a high-pitched, guttural, terrified sound that seemed to be torn from the very fabric of the morning. Jake hit the brakes, his heavy vehicle groaning to a stop. He cut the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening, amplifying his own heartbeat. He waited. Scree, ah, thuck. There it was again. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated panic, and it was coming from the backyard of the Davidsons' house. Jake knew the Davidsons were in Florida for the week. Probably just a hawk got a rabbit, he muttered to himself, but his feet were already moving. He hopped down from the cab, his heavy work boots crunching on the asphalt. He unlatched the side gate of 112 Maple Street and pushed it open, the metal hinges whining in protest. "Hello?" he called out, feeling foolish. "Anyone there?" The backyard was pristine. A neat patio, a still blue swimming pool cover, a perfectly manicured lawn. And in the center of that lawn, a chaotic, writhing mass of something. Jake took 2 steps closer, his brain struggling to process the image. It looked like a pile of discarded patterned carpet. Then the pile moved, and the cry came again, this time a choked, wet gasp. He saw it then. Coils. Thick, muscular coils of olive and dark brown, wrapped in a crushing, suffocating embrace. And trapped within those coils, a flash of spotted fur and a single, desperate amber-yellow eye. It was a bobcat. Jake had seen her before, a fleeting, beautiful ghost at the edge of the woods that bordered the subdivision. He'd admired her from a distance, a symbol of the wild that still clung to the edges of their tidy world. Now, that wild world had collided with something else entirely. The snake. It was colossal. A Burmese python, easily 15 feet long and as thick as Jake's thigh. Its head, a smooth, wedge-shaped instrument of death, was latched onto the bobcat's shoulder, while its body constricted with terrifying, methodical power. It was an invasive nightmare, likely a pet trade escapee, and it was brutally efficient. The bobcat, he'd mentally named her Luna, was dying. Her breath was coming in shallow, agonizing hisses. Her hind legs kicked weakly, her claws, usually such lethal weapons, digging uselessly into the dirt. Jake's hands fumbled for his phone. His fingers were thick and clumsy as he dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm on Maple Street, number 112. Jake stammered, his eyes locked on the gruesome spectacle. There's a snake, a giant snake. It's got a bobcat. You need to send someone, animal control, something. Sir, are you in a safe location? The dispatcher's voice was calm, metallic. I'm in the backyard. Oh God, it's killing her. Sir, please move to a safe distance. Do not approach the animals. We are dispatching officers immediately. Jake clicked off the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt utterly, miserably helpless. He was a man of action, a man who fixed things, who cleared things away. He couldn't just stand there and watch this. And then, his gaze was drawn to a flicker of movement under a large, blooming azalea bush near the patio. He squinted, taking a slow step to the side. It wasn't one flicker. It was three. 3 tiny spotted bodies, no bigger than his work gloves, huddled together in abject terror. They were perfect miniatures of their mother, their blue-gray kitten eyes wide and fixed on the life-and-death struggle happening just 20 feet away. Kittens. The entire equation of the morning shifted. This wasn't just a predator versus predator fight. This was an execution. A mother was being murdered in front of her children. Jake's helplessness evaporated, replaced by a hot, protective rage. He looked at the dying mother, then at the terrified orphans, and then at the monster that was destroying their family. Not on my watch, he whispered, his voice thick. His eyes scanned the yard, frantic. A shovel? Too close? Too dangerous? A rake? Useless. Then he saw it, coiled neatly on a hook by the back faucet, a green garden hose. It was a desperate, stupid idea. But it was an idea. He ran to the spigot, cranking it on full blast. The hose jumped in his hand as the cold water surged through it. He grabbed the nozzle, twisted it to the most powerful jet stream, and advanced. "Get off her!" he roared, aiming the icy blast of water directly at the python's head. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The snake hated it. It released its bite on Luna's shoulder, its massive head rearing back, a black forked tongue tasting the air. It hissed, a sound like a high-pressure air hose rupturing, and the coils loosened. "Yes!" Jake shouted. Luna, freed for a moment, sucked in a desperate, ragged gasp of air. She tried to scramble, to use the opening, but her body was too broken. The python, momentarily distracted, turned its reptilian attention to this new threat. It swung its head toward Jake, its black, lidless eyes devoid of all emotion save hunger. Jake didn't flinch, keeping the stream of water targeted right on its face. But the snake was a creature of singular focus. The man with the water was an annoyance. The meal was a certainty. In a single fluid motion, it ignored Jake and refocused on the bobcat, the coils tightening with a vengeance, a final crushing embrace. Luna let out one last choked cry, and then her head fell limp against the grass. Her amber eye, a moment ago burning with life, went dull and vacant. "No! No, no, no!" Jake yelled, spraying the water futilely. The snake didn't even react, its powerful muscles already beginning the gruesome process of swallowing. He was too late. She was gone. It was in that moment of blackest despair that the wail of sirens cut through the morning. A patrol car, followed by a large white animal control van, careened onto the street, red and blue lights painting the quiet houses. 2 police officers and 2 animal control specialists burst through the gate, their faces grim. They took in the scene in a fraction of a second. "Get back, sir!" Now, one of the officers, a tall woman with Miller on her name tag, commanded. Jake stumbled back, the hose dropping from his numb fingers, spraying a useless puddle on the patio. He felt sick. The team moved with a precision that was almost beautiful. This wasn't their first python. "I need the head," shouted the lead animal control officer, a burly man named Dave. He had a long, looped catch pole. "Sarah, you and Johnson get the tail." Dave advanced, slipping the metal loop expertly over the python's head, just as it began to unhinge its jaw. He yanked back, pulling the snake's head away from the bobcat. The other 2, a young woman and man, grabbed the thick tail, and the 3 of them began the arduous, dangerous work of unwrapping 15 feet of solid, angry muscle. The snake thrashed, coiling its body around itself, trying to get leverage, but the team was strong and they were practiced. She's gone," Jake said, his voice cracking, to Officer Miller, who was standing with him. "Let's see, Mr. Thornton," Miller said, her hand on her sidearm, her eyes on the fight. As the last coil was pulled free from the bobcat's body, a 4th person ran through the gate, a paramedic who had arrived with the police. "It's a bobcat." The paramedic, whose jacket read Casey, asked, surprised. "Just check her," Jake pleaded. Casey ran forward, kneeling beside the small, spotted body. Luna was a pitiful sight. She was covered in mud and snake saliva, her beautiful fur matted and bloody. Her body was bent at an unnatural angle. Casey put 2 fingers to her chest, then pressed a stethoscope to the fur. She looked up, her eyes wide. "I've got a heartbeat. It's thready, but it's there. She's in shock, but she's alive." A jolt went through Jake. Alive. The animal control team, having finally subdued the python, was wrestling it into a large ventilated crate. It was a chaotic, grunting affair. "She needs oxygen and pressure for the internal bleeding," Casey was saying, already prepping a small mask. Luna lay on the grass, a rag doll. But as Casey spoke, the bobcat's ears twitched. Her dull eye flickered. From under the azalea bush, a tiny, terrified mew escaped. It was quiet, barely audible. But to the mother, it was a thunderclap. Luna's head, which had seemed too heavy to lift seconds before, snapped up. Her body, broken and crushed, galvanized with a single primal purpose. She saw her kittens. She saw the paramedic leaning over her. And she saw the animal control officers closing the lid on the crate containing the monster. The snake's tail, thick and scaly, was the last part to go into the container. And Luna moved. It wasn't a run, or even a crawl. It was a lunge, a dragging, agonizing propulsion of pure, unadulterated maternal fury. She pulled herself across the grass with her front claws, her hind legs completely useless, a low, terrifying growl rumbling from her crushed chest. "Whoa! Ma'am, stand back!" Dave shouted, thinking she was lunging at the paramedic. But she wasn't. She ignored the humans, ignored her own pain. She launched herself past them, her jaws wide, and clamped down with all her remaining strength on the thrashing tail of the python as it disappeared into the crate. There was a collective gasp. Here was a creature, seconds from death, her body a tapestry of broken bones and crushed organs, and her only instinct was to attack the monster that had threatened her young. She was going to have one final word. The snake's tail writhed, pulling her. The officers were shouting, "Get her! Get her off!" "No, wait, gently!" It was Casey, the paramedic. "She'll tear herself apart." Dave, the animal control officer, gently but firmly took Luna's head in his gloved hands. "It's okay, Mama," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "It's over. You got him. Let go. It's okay." He worked his fingers into her jaw, and as if sensing the fight was truly over, she released her grip. And then, the last of her strength, the last of the adrenaline, faded. Her head dropped to the grass. Her eyes rolled back. "She's crashing!" Casey yelled. "We gotta move now!" The team, which had come for a snake, was now in a frantic race to save a bobcat. They scooped her onto a triage blanket, and the group of them, cops, paramedics, animal handlers, ran her to the van, where Casey began administering an IV and oxygen. They slammed the doors and, with sirens now blazing for a new reason, sped away, bound for the county's wildlife rehabilitation clinic. The backyard was suddenly, profoundly silent. The only sounds were the drip of the forgotten hose and the thud of Jake's heart. He was shaking so hard his knees threatened to buckle. Officer Miller put a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Mr. Thornton," she said. "You saved her life." "Her kittens," Jake breathed, his eyes turning back to the azalea bush. Just as he spoke, a small, mud-caked sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman in her late 60s with a shock of white hair and the most intelligent eyes Jake had ever seen got out. She was wearing cargo shorts and carrying a thick pair of leather gloves and a pet carrier. "I'm Allison," she said, striding into the backyard. "I run the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center. I heard the call on the scanner. Where are they?" Officer Miller pointed. "Under the azaleas, Mrs. Allison." "3 of them, we think. And they are not happy." Jake watched as Mrs. Allison approached the bush, not with force, but with a quiet, patient respect. She got on her hands and knees, ignoring the mud, and began to speak in a low, soft murmur. "It's all right, little ones. The world is too big today, I know. But you're safe now. Your mama is a fighter. And now you have to be too." She worked for 20 minutes, and one by one, she emerged with a tiny, hissing, spitting ball of fury. She placed each one gently into the carrier. When she was done, she stood up, wiping a smear of dirt from her cheek. She looked at Jake, who was still standing by the patio looking lost. "She was incredible," Jake said, his voice quiet. "I thought she was dead. And she just got up and attacked it." Mrs. Allison nodded, a rare, sad smile touching her lips. "Maternal instinct, Mr. Thornton. It's the most powerful force on this planet. It's stronger than fear, stronger than pain. Sometimes it's even stronger than death." She and Jake stood there for a long moment, the neighborhood now waking up. People were poking their heads out, drawn by the commotion. The story of the battle on Maple Street was already beginning to spread. Jake looked at the carrier, where the 3 kittens were now huddled together, a tiny, trembling mass of shared grief and fear. Then he looked at the wet, dark patch of grass where Luna had fallen, and at the driveway, where the van had sped away. His heart, which had been racing, now felt heavy as a stone. Luna was alive, yes, But the road ahead for this tiny, fractured family was long and uncertain. The next 3 days were a blur for Jake. He finished his route, but his mind wasn't in it. He couldn't stop seeing Luna's amber eye, or the way she had lunged for the snake. He called the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center twice a day. The news was grim. Luna was in critical condition. She had 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bruising. She was in an oxygen-rich incubator on a heavy regimen of antibiotics and pain medication. She was, the vet told him, in hypovolemic shock. She was fighting, but she was losing. "She's given up," Mrs. Allison told him on the phone on the 3rd day. Her voice was tired. "She's not responding. And the kittens, they won't eat. I'm trying to bottle feed, but they won't take it. They're fading too. They need their mother." "So what do we do?" Jake asked, a familiar, desperate helplessness creeping back in. "We try one last thing," Mrs. Allison said. "It's a long shot. It could kill her. But I think it's the only thing that will save them." An hour later, Jake was standing outside a recovery room at the clinic, holding the carrier with the 3 kittens. Mrs. Allison had called him, asking him to bring them. "You're part of this, Jake. They should know you're sent too." The kittens were weak, their tiny mews almost silent. Inside the room, Luna lay on a heated blanket. She was hooked up to an IV. She looked small and defeated. "Okay," Mrs. Allison said, taking a deep breath. "Open it." Jake unlatched the carrier door. The kittens didn't move. They were too weak, too scared. Jake gently reached in and lifted one out, then the other 2. He placed them on the blanket, a few feet from their mother. At first, nothing. Luna didn't even open her eyes. "Luna," Mrs. Allison said softly, gently nudging her head. "Luna, look. Look who's here." One of the kittens, the smallest one, let out a tiny, desperate cry. Luna's eyes snapped open. The beep of her heart monitor, which had been slow and erratic, suddenly sped up. Beep, 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 beep. She lifted her head. It was a monumental effort. She saw the 3 small, trembling creatures. She let out a low, soft sound. Not a growl, but a chuff, a bobcat's call. The kittens, hearing it, found a new strength. They began to crawl, their tiny legs clumsy, moving toward the sound, toward the smell of their mother. Luna dragged her own head forward, meeting them halfway. They scrambled onto her, nuzzling into her fur, seeking warmth and safety. 1, 2, 3. Luna began to lick them. She licked them and licked them, a rough, frantic cleaning. She was counting them. She was reclaiming them. And then, a sound started deep in her chest. It was a low, rumbling vibration. The heart monitor steadied. The vet, watching from the doorway, had tears in her eyes. "Is that?" Jake whispered. "Yes," Mrs. Allison said, her own voice thick. "She's purring. The little minx is purring." The what happens next was a miracle, written in small daily victories. Luna's recovery, fueled by the presence of her kittens, was astonishing. The will to live, which had been extinguished, was now a roaring fire. She ate, she healed, she nursed her babies, her purr a constant healing presence. Jake became a permanent fixture at the center. He'd show up after his route, his garbage truck parked out front, and he would sit with Mrs. Allison watching the tiny family on the clinic's cameras. He brought donations, got his whole route involved. The story of Luna and Jake had made the local news, and money poured in to support the center. Weeks turned into months. The kittens, named by Jake as Spike, Jet, and Faye, grew from fragile babies into boisterous, pouncing adolescents. Luna's body healed, the scars on her fur fading. She taught them to hunt, using toys, and later, live but safe for her prey provided by the center. She taught them to be wild. Finally, a cool, crisp day in late autumn, the call came. "They're ready," Mrs. Allison said. Jake and Mrs. Allison drove the family, now in a large, secure transport crate, deep into the protected woods of the Blue Ridge Mountains, miles from any suburb, any road, any chance of another python. They parked the truck and carried the crate to a clearing. "This is it, Mama," Mrs. Allison said, her hand on the latch. Jake's heart was a strange mix of joy and sorrow. He was saying goodbye. Mrs. Allison opened the door. Luna stepped out, cautious, her paws testing the new earth. She was magnificent. Her coat was thick, her amber eyes bright and sharp. She was no longer the broken victim on the lawn. She was a queen, returned to her kingdom. The three young bobcats, now nearly her size, bolted out, tumbling over each other, drunk with the new smells of freedom. They disappeared into the underbrush. Luna waited. She turned her head and looked, not at Mrs. Allison, but at Jake. She held his gaze for a full 10 seconds. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't an animal tamed. It was an acknowledgement. A meeting of two survivors, two guardians. Then, with a powerful, silent leap, she was gone. A spotted ghost vanishing into the forest to join her children. Jake stood in the silence, listening to the wind in the pines. He hadn't realized he was crying until Mrs. Allison put a hand on his arm. "They'll be all right, Jake," she said. "I know," he said, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I know they will." He went back to his route the next day, the rumble of his truck a familiar comfort. But Jake Thornton was a changed man. The mornings on Maple Street were quiet again, the lawns pristine, the world predictable. But Jake knew, in a way he never had before, that just beneath that tidy surface, a wild, fierce, and beautiful love was always burning. And sometimes, if you were very, very lucky, you got to be close to its fire.